Please stay with me tonight. A millionaire's last plea to his loyal maid, asterisk. The grand ballroom of the Metropolitan Hotel sparkled with crystal chandeliers as hundreds of guests celebrated another successful charity auction. Vincent Sterling stood at the podium, his silver hair perfectly styled, his navy suit impeccable as always. At 55, he commanded respect in every room he entered. His real estate empire had built half of Manhattan's skyline, and his name appeared on hospital, wings, and university buildings across the country. Ladies and gentlemen, Vincent's deep voice carried across the room. Tonight we have raised over $2 million for children's cancer research. The crowd erupted in applause, but something felt wrong. His vision blurred and a sharp pain shot through his chest. The microphone slipped from his hand as he collapsed onto the stage. The ambulance ride to Mount Sinai Hospital was a blur of sirens and flashing lights. Vincent drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of paramedics checking his vital signs. When he finally opened his eyes, harsh fluorescent lights greeted him, along with the steady beeping of machines. Dr. Morrison entered the room with a thick file in his hands. His expression was grave as he pulled up a chair beside Vincent's bed. "Mr. Sterling, I need to discuss your test results with you." Vincent sat up slowly, his business instincts telling him to prepare for bad news. "You have advanced pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. I'm afraid the prognosis is not good." The words hit Vincent like a physical blow. He had survived market crashes, hostile takeovers, and countless business battles. But this was different. This was final. "How long?" he asked. Quietly, 6 months, possibly less, Dr. Morrison replied gently. "I'm truly sorry." Vincent stared out the hospital window at the city he had helped build. All his wealth, all his power, and none of it could change this diagnosis. He thought about his empty penthouse apartment, his silent office, its contact list full of business associates but no real friends. He had spent decades building an empire, but had forgotten to build a life. The ride home felt longer than usual. His driver, James, kept glancing in the rearview mirror with concern, but Vincent remained silent. The penthouse elevator opened too, reveal his pristine apartment, every surface polished to perfection, but the silence was deafening. No wife to greet him, no children's laughter, no family photos on the mantle. That's when he heard soft footsteps in the hallway. "Good evening." "Mr. Sterling," came a gentle voice. It was Rosalie Martinez, his housekeeper of 3 years. She was 28, with warm brown eyes and dark hair always pulled back in a neat bun. Vincent had barely noticed her before, despite her quiet presence keeping his world organized. "You're working late again," Vincent observed, his voice softer than usual. Rosalie smiled kindly. "I wanted to make sure everything was ready for your return. The auction was successful, I heard." She didn't mention his collapse, though he was certain she knew. Her discretion was one of the qualities that made her invaluable. Vincent watched as she arranged fresh flowers in the entryway vase. There was something peaceful about her movements, something that made the empty apartment feel less cold. For the first time in years, he truly looked at someone who shared his space. "Rosalie," he called softly. She turned, her eyes questioning. "Thank you for keeping everything so perfect." She smiled warmly, not knowing that her employer had just received the worst news of his life. As she gathered her things to leave, Vincent felt an overwhelming urge to ask her to stay, to not leave him alone with his diagnosis. But the words remained trapped in his throat. After she left, Vincent poured himself a glass of whiskey and stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, overlooking Central Park. The city lights twinkled below like stars, but he felt more alone than ever. 6 months to live, and no one to share it with. No one except the quiet woman who had been caring for his home with such gentle dedication. That night, Vincent lay awake thinking about mortality, legacy, and the strange comfort he had felt. In Rosalie's presence, he had built towers that would outlast him, but what about love? What about human connection? What about the simple joy of not facing the end alone? These thoughts swirled in his mind as the city never slept outside his window. 3 weeks passed since Vincent's diagnosis, and he found himself paying more attention to Rosalie's daily routine. She arrived each morning at 8, quietly preparing his breakfast before he awoke. She moved through the apartment like a gentle breeze, organizing his life while staying invisible. But Vincent was seeing her now, really seeing her. He began timing his morning coffee to coincide with her cleaning schedule, finding excuses to be in whatever room she was working in. He learned that she hummed softly while dusting, that she always arranged books by height, and that she left tiny handwritten notes reminding him of important appointments. "Rosalie," he said one Thursday morning as she watered the plants by his office window, "do you have family in the city?" She looked surprised by his sudden interest in her personal life. "My mother lives in Queens," she replied carefully. "I send money to help with her medical bills." Vincent nodded, filing away this information. He was learning that Rosalie worked 2 other part-time jobs to support her mother's diabetes treatment. She took night classes at the community college, studying business administration. She had dreams beyond cleaning his penthouse. Somehow this made him respect her even more. That evening, Vincent made a decision that would change both their lives. He waited until Rosalie finished her usual Thursday routine, then asked her to sit down in the living room. She looked nervous, probably thinking she had done something wrong. "I need to tell you something important," Vincent began, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I'm dying." The words hung in the air between them. "Ow." Rosalie's eyes widened with shock, then filled with genuine concern. "Mr. Sterling, I don't understand." It's explained about the cancer, the 6-month prognosis, the emptiness of facing death alone. Rosalie listened without interruption, her expression growing more compassionate with each word. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "I'm so sorry," she finally whispered. "Is there anything I can do?" This simple question, asked with such sincerity, nearly broke Vincent's composure. When was the last time someone had asked what they could do for him, rather than what he could do for them? "Actually, there is something," Vincent said, his voice trembling slightly. "I know this will sound strange, but I've been thinking about legacy, about leaving something meaningful behind." Rosalie waited patiently for him to continue. "I don't want to die without experiencing real love, real family. I know we barely know each other, but I feel more peace in your presence than I've felt in years." Vincent took a deep breath. "I want to ask you something that will sound impossible." Rosalie's heart was racing, sensing the weight of whatever he was about to say. Vincent looked directly into her eyes. "Would you consider having a child with me? Not out of obligation or for money, but to give me the chance to love someone unconditionally. Before I leave this world," request hung between them like a fragile bridge over an impossible chasm. Rosalie stared at him, speechless. This wasn't just about physical intimacy. It was about creating life, about love, about a dying man's desperate hope for meaning in his final months. The silence that followed Vincent's request stretched like an eternity. Rosalie's mind raced with 1,000 thoughts, but her heart understood something her logic couldn't quite grasp. She saw vulnerability in Vincent's eyes that she had never witnessed before. This powerful man who controlled millions of dollars was asking her for something money couldn't buy. "I need time to think," Rosalie said softly. Vincent nodded, understanding the magnitude of what he had asked. "Of course. I don't expect an answer immediately. Just needed you to know what's in my heart." Over the following days, their dynamic shifted subtly. Vincent began leaving his office door open while working, enjoying the sound of Rosalie moving through the apartment. She started lingering longer during conversations, asking about his business, his past, his fears about the future. One evening, Vincent found Rosalie on the apartment's terrace, looking out at the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "It's beautiful up here," she said as he joined her. "Never had time to really notice before." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the city transition from day to night. "Tell me about your childhood," Vincent said. Rosalie smiled, sharing stories about growing up in a small apartment with her mother, working in her family's bakery, dreaming of someday having her own business. "What about you?" she asked. Vincent rarely spoke about his past, but something about the twilight hour made him feel safe to open up. He told her about his lonely childhood with emotionally distant parents, how he had thrown himself into work to fill the void, how success had become both his blessing and his curse. "I've never been in love," Vincent admitted, surprising himself with the confession. I thought I was a few times, but it was always about business connections or social status. I've never felt what I imagine real love feels like. Rosalie turned to look at him. What do you imagine it feels like? Vincent was quiet for a moment, considering. Like peace, he said finally. Like coming home to yourself. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Not just attraction, but recognition. Two people who had been living half-lives suddenly seeing the possibility of wholeness. Vincent, Rosalie said, using his first name for the first time. I've been thinking about what you asked. His breath caught. If we did this, if we tried to create something beautiful together, it couldn't just be about having a child. It would have to be about us learning to love each other. Vincent felt his heart racing. Are you saying yes? I'm saying I want to try, Rosalie replied. I want to try to love you, and I want you to try to love me. Really love me, not just the idea of having someone. That night, they talked until dawn. Not about business or responsibilities, but about dreams, fears, hopes, and the strange miracle of two lonely people finding each other at the edge of everything. Vincent shared his terror of dying unloved and unmourned. Rosalie revealed her fear of never being seen as more than hired help, never having a family of her own. They discovered they both loved old movies, hated fancy restaurants, and dreamed of simple moments that money couldn't buy. As the sun rose over Manhattan, Vincent took Rosalie's hand. I promise to love you with whatever time I have left, he said, not because I'm dying, but because living without love isn't really living at all. Rosalie squeezed his hand gently. Then let's learn how to live together. The transformation began slowly, like dawn breaking over the city. Vincent canceled his morning business meetings, choosing instead to have breakfast with Rosalie on the terrace. They talked about everything and nothing, discovering the simple pleasure of sharing morning coffee with someone who truly listened. Vincent insisted that Rosalie quit her other jobs. Let me take care of your mother's medical bills, he said, when she protested. This isn't about money or obligation. I want you to have time to focus on us, on what we're building together. They established new routines that felt like the foundation of a real relationship. Evening walks through Central Park, cooking dinner together in Vincent's rarely used kitchen, watching old movies curled up on the couch. Vincent was amazed by how natural it felt to hold Rosalie's hand, to have someone curl up against his shoulder. I never knew how lonely I was until I wasn't lonely anymore, Vincent confessed one night as they sat by the fireplace. Rosalie traced patterns on his chest, her head resting over his heart. I never knew I could feel this safe with someone, she replied. Their physical relationship developed naturally, without the urgency Vincent had initially imagined. They spent hours just holding each other, talking, learning the landscape of each other's souls. When they finally made love, it was with a tenderness that surprised them both. I love you, Vincent whispered against Rosalie's hair afterward. I know that sounds impossible after such a short time, but I love you more than I thought my heart could hold. Rosalie lifted her head to look at him, her eyes bright with tears. I love you too. I love your gentleness, your curiosity about the world, the way you make me feel like I matter. Vincent felt something shift inside his chest, as if a door that had been locked his entire life had finally opened. Stay with me tonight, he said. Stay with me every night. The weeks that followed were the happiest of Vincent's life. He took Rosalie to his favorite bookstore, where they spent hours browsing and reading passages aloud to each other. They visited museums, walked through gardens, had picnics in the park like teenagers in love. Vincent also began making arrangements for his legacy, but now it wasn't just about business. He set up a trust fund for Rosalie's education, paid off her mother's medical debts, and started planning for the child they both hoped would come. What if it doesn't happen? Rosalie asked one evening as they watched the sunset from their terrace. What if we can't have a baby? Vincent pulled her closer. Then we'll have had this, he said simply. We'll have had love. It's already more than I ever expected to find. But fate had been listening to their quiet hopes. 2 months after they had started trying, Rosalie woke up feeling nauseous. The pregnancy test they took together showed 2 pink lines, and they both cried tears of joy and fear. "Our baby," Vincent whispered, his hand on Rosalie's still flat stomach. "Our miracle." And the irony wasn't lost on either of them. It's new life grew inside Rosalie. Vincent could feel his own life slowly ebbing away. Instead of making him bitter, it filled him with gratitude. He would get to experience the beginning of his child's story, even if he couldn't see the end. "I'm not afraid anymore," Vincent told Rosalie as they lay in bed that night. "I used to be terrified of dying alone, but now I know I'll never really be alone. Part of me will live on in our child, and part of you will always be with me." Rosalie kissed his forehead gently. "We're going to make the most of every day we have," she promised. "Every single day." Spring arrived early that year, filling the terrace with blooming flowers and warm sunshine. Rosalie's pregnancy was progressing beautifully, and Vincent spent hours reading parenting books, planning the nursery, and talking to their unborn child every night before bed. "Hello, little one," he would whisper to Rosalie's growing belly. "This is your daddy. I can't wait to meet you." Vincent's health was declining more rapidly now, but he faced each day with a peace he had never known before. He had moved his office to the apartment so he could spend more time with Rosalie, working from bed when the pain became too intense. "I want to marry you," Vincent said one morning as they watched the sunrise. "I know it seems rushed, but I want our child to have your name legally connected to mine. I want you to be my wife, not just the mother of my child." Rosalie had been expecting this conversation. "Yes," she said simply. "I want to be your wife." They were married the following week in a small ceremony on their terrace, with just Rosalie's mother and Vincent's lawyer as witnesses. Rosalie wore a simple white dress, and Vincent had never seen anyone more beautiful. When they exchanged vows, both promised to love each other for as long as they both lived, understanding the weight of those words differently than most couples. As Rosalie entered her 3rd trimester, Vincent grew weaker. He spent most days in bed now, but his spirit remained strong. They had converted the guest room into a nursery, painting the walls a soft yellow and filling it with books, toys, and dreams. "I have something to show you, Vincent," said one afternoon, handing Rosalie a thick leather journal. "I've been writing letters to our child. One for every birthday, every milestone, every moment I wish I could be there for." Rosalie opened the journal with trembling hands. The first page read, "To our precious baby on your first day of life." The second, "To our darling child on your first birthday." Page after page of love letters to a child Vincent might never meet. "There's also this," Vincent said, producing a smaller envelope. "Instructions for Rosalie, for after." She didn't want to take it, didn't want to acknowledge what it represented. But she understood it was Vincent's way of taking care of them even after he was gone. The baby came 3 weeks early on a rainy Tuesday in October. Vincent was too weak to go to the hospital, so they had arranged for a home birth with a medical team standing by. As Rosalie labored, Vincent held her hand, whispering encouragement and love. When their daughter was born, perfectly healthy and beautiful, Vincent cried tears of pure joy. "Hello, Emma Rose," he whispered as the doctor placed the baby in his arms. "I'm your daddy, and I love you more than all the stars in the sky." For 2 precious weeks, Vincent got to be a father. He changed diapers, sang lullabies, and spent hours just staring at his daughter's perfect face. He knew his time was running out, but every moment with Emma and Rosalie felt like a lifetime of happiness compressed into days. On a quiet Sunday morning, as autumn painted the trees outside their window in shades of gold and red, Vincent felt the final chapter of his story approaching. Emma was sleeping peacefully in his arms, and Rosalie was curled up beside them. "Thank you, Vincent," whispered to Rosalie. "Thank you for loving me, for giving me our daughter, for showing me what it means to truly live." Rosalie kissed him softly. "Thank you for choosing me, for trusting me with your heart, for giving me the greatest love I've ever known." Vincent Sterling passed away peacefully that evening, surrounded by the family he had found in his final months. He left behind a business empire, but more importantly, he left behind a wife who had learned to love fearlessly, and a daughter who would grow up knowing she was the product of a love story that began at the end of one life and created the beginning of another. His final letter to Emma, Vincent had written, "My darling daughter, by the time you read this. You'll be old enough to understand that love doesn't measure itself in years, but in depth. Your mother and I had only months together, but we loved each other with the intensity of a lifetime. You are the proof that love creates something eternal, something that death cannot touch. Live boldly, love deeply, and remember that you carry within you the best of both your parents. Rosalie kept all of Vincent's letters, and as Emma grew, she would read them together, keeping alive the memory of a father who had loved them both with his final breath.